On March 16, 2026, inside a factory in Montreal, Canada, a decades-long American monopoly quietly began to fracture. Rolls-Royce announced that this facility would produce components for a sixth-generation fighter jet engine. This wasn't just another industrial contract. Online, the sentiment was immediate. The U.S. monopoly is over. Because when a nation gains the ability to build the heart of a next-generation fighter on its own terms, the old order begins to look very fragile indeed. But to understand the weight of that announcement, you first have to understand the invisible architecture of dependency it just broke. That invisible architecture of dependency is a system we can call the old order. It's not a conspiracy. It's a strategic design built over decades using export controls, U.S. ownership of engine and software IP, and a centralized upgrade and sustainment pipeline to make Allied air power structurally reliant on the United States. A quiet constraint that has shaped global military strategy beneath the surface of formal treaties. And it is exactly this system that the Montreal announcement begins to challenge. The ultimate expression of this order is the F-35 program. It represents a bargain. In exchange for purchasing the world's most advanced and interconnected fighter jets, a nation enters what is, in practice, a gilded cage. You receive unparalleled capability, but you quietly cede control over the technological core of your own Air Force. A 2024 Congressional Research Service report details how this works. The U.S.-led Joint Program Office controls software updates and the mission data files that tell the jet how to classify threats. If you're the commander of your Air Force and you want to refresh those files on your frontline fighters, you don't direct your own engineers. You submit requirements into the Joint Program Office pipeline and wait on its schedule and approval. That gates your ability to adapt the aircraft to new threats or a sudden regional crisis, and it shapes when, where, and against whom you can deploy those jets. This dependency runs deeper. The same report notes that the F-135 engine, the F-35's logistics system, Alice, now being replaced by Odin, and the global spare parts pool are all centrally managed from the United States. That keeps the critical elements of maintenance and upgrades, engine overhauls, software loads, access to key components, inside U.S. controlled channels and limits Allies' ability to build independent sustainment. Allies can fly and service the aircraft day to day. The levers that determine its availability and future upgrades sit outside their jurisdiction. If Washington slows an upgrade, reprioritizes parts to another theater, or restricts certain software configurations, your options narrow, sortie rates fall, and some missions become too risky to fly alone. For decades, that trade-off, top-tier capability in exchange for accepting those limits, was treated as the unavoidable price of admission to modern air power. But what if that price was no longer the only option? What if a few countries quietly started building an alternative, regaining more direct control over engines, data, and long-term sustainment, a way to field next-generation combat power while keeping the levers of upgrade, maintenance, and deployment under their own flag? The first serious move toward that model did not start in Washington, but in a factory just outside Montreal. That first move in that factory outside Montreal traces back to a design table half a world away. The quiet rebellion we spoke of has a name. It's called the Global Combat Air Program, or GCAP. And while Washington was consolidating control over its allies' air power, three key nations were methodically laying the foundations for a different path entirely. This wasn't a loud declaration of defiance. It was a quiet shift in the wiring behind Western air power. On one map, you have the F-35 partnership, a vast network with its center of gravity locked firmly in the United States. On another screen, a different map starts to take shape, linking the advanced industrial hubs of the United Kingdom, Italy, and Japan. GCAP is not just another fighter project. It is a sixth-generation combat aircraft and systems program built from day one as a joint venture among those three states. They are not simply buying into an existing platform. They are building a parallel ecosystem for next generation air power, owning the engine, the software, and the support architecture together. And crucially, it sits outside the American system and its restrictive software locks. For countries like Canada, that kind of architecture restores something we haven't had in this space for a long time: genuine strategic choice. It means access to cutting-edge capability without routing every operational decision through a single foreign gatekeeper. And it's from this new independent ecosystem that the engine technology, the very heart of a fighter, is being made available. This is the source of the strategic opportunity now landing in Montreal. The core engine is not a bolt-on accessory. It is the hardest piece of the aircraft to master and the center of the industrial value chain that surrounds it. So when that technology is opened up, the balance of leverage starts to move. But that raises the critical question. With established, powerful partners like the UK, Italy, and Japan leading the charge, why would this challenger alliance look to Canada for one of the most critical components of its new platform? The answer has little to do with politics or geography. It's about a specific, earned legacy of engineering competence, a reputation built on one of the most reliable and successful aircraft engines in history. To understand why GCAP is betting on Montreal, you first have to understand the legend of the PT-6. That legend, the PT-6, began not with a bang, but with a low hum of reliability. First flown in 1963, this Pratt & Whitney Canada engine has seen over 64,000 units delivered, more than 500 million flight hours, and service on 155 types of aircraft in over 170 countries. For more than half a century, it has been the global reference point for dependability. But the most important thing the PT-6 ever built was not an engine. It was an ecosystem concentrated around Montreal, a world-class aerospace hub made up of generations of engineers and technicians who know high-performance propulsion in their bones, and an intricate supply chain, a web of hundreds of specialized Canadian firms that form the industrial bedrock. From design and testing to precision manufacturing and in-service support, the full stack needed to take a turbine from concept to certified hardware lives here. At Mirabel, the capability is physical. In one test cell, a prototype engine is bolted down. The door seals, turbines spool from a high-pitched whine into a steady roar as it runs at full power for hours to prove it can survive real abuse. Down the corridor, an altitude chamber thins the air to 60,000 feet and drives the temperature through brutal swings to see how hardware behaves. In the cold, high sky, a fighter has to own. In a nearby clean room, where a single dust particle is a defect, teams assemble sensitive components by hand. Anything missed today becomes a failure in a cockpit years from now. This strategic architecture wasn't thrown together for one program. It has been built, refined, and paid for over decades. Those same disciplines, endurance runs, high-altitude certification, contamination-controlled assembly, are exactly what a sixth-generation fighter engine needs. So when Rolls-Royce and its partners chose a North American base for the GCAP power plant, they did not have to build this world from scratch. They could plug directly into Montreal and Mirabel. Test cells wired for turbine development, altitude facilities qualified to push hardware to its limits, and a workforce that knows how to read a vibration trace and fix a problem before it becomes a failure. Instead of losing years to construction permits, training pipelines, and a brand new supply chain learning on the job, the program can move straight into integration, iterative testing, and production ramp-up on proven ground. Canada had already done the long, quiet, difficult work, and that is what earned it a real seat at the GCAP table. Not a courtesy flag, but engine and test capability that is hard to copy and must be taken seriously in every design and work share decision. When the core of the engine and the means to prove it live here, Canada stops being just a buyer and becomes a co-author of how future air power is built. That foundation of rugged reliability is now the launch pad for a radical leap, the GCAP engine at the heart of tomorrow's air power. The first departure is in its fundamental architecture. This is the GCAP class engine whose production line is being built in Montreal based on what engineers call an adaptive cycle. Think of it as two distinct personalities. A high-performance combat mode that maximizes thrust, and a high-efficiency cruise mode that maximizes range and endurance. This isn't a simple toggle. The engine reconfigures its airflow to match the exact flight condition. For a pilot, that means both a sprinter's explosive power and a marathoner's endurance on demand. For a commander, it means aircraft that fly farther, stay on station longer, and lean less on vulnerable refueling tankers. A platform like the Saab Gripen, which today flies with a 98 kilonewton FS4 engine, could swap in this 150-190 kilonewton class power plant. That change would push it toward nearly double the available thrust at the top end, driving a step change in range and combat performance. And because that's an engine upgrade, not a clean sheet aircraft design, you're looking at a 3 to 5 year path to a generational leap in capability instead of a decade-long replacement program. The second leap happens inside the engine's hottest sections. It relies on advanced materials called ceramic matrix composites, which let critical parts run at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Celsius, hotter than the melting point of the engine's own superalloy casing. That thermal headroom isn't an engineering vanity project. It lets designers squeeze more work out of every kilogram of engine. In practice, it enables a power-to-weight ratio out of reach for conventional metals, feeding more thrust from a lighter core, sustaining higher speeds, and cutting the infrared glow that heat-seeking missiles lock onto. Taken with the 150-190 kilonewton thrust class and the engine's megawatt scale electrical output, that 2,000 degree figure is one of 3 numbers that mark this as a new category of power plant, not a routine upgrade. These 2 advances, an adaptive cycle and near impossible materials, would already justify calling this a generational shift. Together, they give you an engine in the 150-190 kilonewton thrust class, with core parts running beyond 2,000 degrees, that can still spare megawatt-class electrical power. Pause for a moment. An engine that powerful, that hot, and that electrically capable is revolutionary. But that stack of numbers is not what has defense planners in Washington, Beijing, and Ottawa circling this program in red ink and quietly updating their wargaming models. The true game changer isn't the thrust or the heat. It's the electricity. This engine is a flying megawatt-class power station. That's not just enough to run its radar and avionics. It's enough electricity to light up a small neighborhood, all generated by an engine core roughly the size of a car. That power isn't about cockpit comforts. It's the prerequisite for the next generation of systems, from dense sensor suites and data-hungry battlefield networks to, eventually, directed energy weapons. A fighter without that onboard grid is just a kinetic instrument. A fighter with it becomes a sovereign node in a wider combat network, an adaptive engine built from near impossible materials that generates its own electrical grid. The engineering is breathtaking, but it would be a mistake to think the technology alone is the story. The most powerful component isn't the one spinning at 20,000 RPM. It's the fact that this architecture is being designed and industrialized on Canadian soil. The real leverage comes from controlling the design, production, and upgrade path. Because in this new era, sovereignty isn't just about flying the hardware. It's about owning the architecture. And that architecture brings us to the core of the story, the split between the old F-35 model and the new Montreal model. The difference comes down to one word: control. Remember the gilded cage we talked about earlier? That is the F-35 model. You sign up, you pay in, you get access to one of the most advanced aircraft. But the control surfaces that really matter sit somewhere else. The Congressional Research Service lays out how that works. Crucial software updates move only when Washington signs off. The US government owns the global spare parts pool, so every replacement component is drawn from an American managed inventory, and day-to-day maintenance and diagnostics data run through a centralized US logistics backbone. If that backbone slows or its rules change, your Air Force feels it immediately. That is what I mean by controlled capability. You fly the jet and carry the operating risk, but the software, the spares, and the data highways that keep it alive all run through someone else's hands. You own the airframe, they own the operating system and the supply switch. What is taking shape in Montreal is built as the opposite of that. The GCAP engine line is being designed around a simple constraint: no American components, and therefore no exposure to U.S. international traffic in arms regulations. The point is not symbolism, it is engineering the legal and technical hooks right out of the system. Every choke point we just walked through on the F-35 side shows up here as a design requirement to escape. Software decisions made within the partner group, not in a U.S. program office. Tooling and spare parts tied to the Montreal facility and its consortium partners, not pooled under a Pentagon contract. Performance data and maintenance planning governed by an allied architecture where Canada has a hand on the controls instead of being a user at the end of someone else's dashboard. That is why the Montreal GCAP model is about sovereign capability. In this architecture, Canada does not just host a plant, it holds keys. We help set the production tempo. We own our maintenance pathways. We choose when and how to roll out upgrades. And the decision to support or deny an export sits with Canada and its partners around the table, not on a desk in Washington stamped ITAR. This is the sovereignty dividend, the strategic return on deciding to own the architecture instead of renting access. If Ottawa wants to accelerate an upgrade schedule to match a specific threat, it does not have to wait for an American software release window. If a crisis breaks out and Canada decides that a particular ally must keep its aircraft flying, we can redirect engines and parts we control, rather than lining up in a queue for U.S. managed inventory. If a politically sensitive buyer asks for engines, the question becomes, does this fit our interests and those of London and Tokyo? Not, will Washington sign the permission slip? Those choices compound over years. Independent upgrade cycles, ITAR-free export decisions, and crisis time autonomy reshape how other states read your guarantees and your red lines. You are no longer just operating platforms designed elsewhere. You are a co-author of the industrial base that underwrites your foreign policy. We have just mapped the core difference: controlled capability versus sovereign capability. In your view, is this move the most significant step for Canada's strategic independence in a generation? I'm genuinely interested to read your analysis in the comments. The hard question remains: is this true absolute sovereignty, or in breaking one dependency, have we simply created another with London and Tokyo? Are we now the master of this new architecture, or a privileged partner holding a different set of keys? And that question of trading one set of keys for another is precisely the right one. It's the point where a compelling national project meets the cold, hard reality of industrial strategy. For the strategists watching, the sharpest critique of this entire plan deserves a full hearing. Now, a fair criticism many of you have already clocked is this: while this project masterfully sidesteps American control, the core intellectual property, the fundamental design authority for the engine, remains with Rolls-Royce, a UK-based company. The blueprints are not our own. That distinction matters. Licensed production is not the same as full design sovereignty. Canada can manufacture the engine but may not have the authority to make fundamental changes or pioneer major upgrades on its own. Integrating it independently into a new aircraft or unmanned platform would still require the original design authority to sign off. Every time you depend on an external design office for those decisions, you inherit their timelines, their priorities, and their risk tolerance, and that extra layer tends to add cost and delay, even when you've stepped outside the American export net. You can see how this dynamic plays out in real deals. Take past Saab Gripen fighter proposals that offered local final assembly. On paper, the buyer gets a domestic production line. In practice, the aircraft still relies on foreign-owned software, a US-built engine, and other imported systems. Any export, upgrade, or operational change has to pass through those foreign IP holders and their government's export control regimes. The assembly line is local. The leverage is not. This brings us to the question a true skeptic would press. In a future conflict, could Canada find itself exposed to new leverage points, this time originating from London rather than Washington? It is a valid risk, and from that narrow perspective, the critique holds. If this engine deal were the entire strategy, it would indeed be a flawed one, swapping a very visible dependency for a more subtle one. But that analysis, while correct, is incomplete. It's like examining a single perfectly machined cornerstone without seeing the plans for the entire cathedral. Because this licensed production isn't the endpoint. It's the calculated first step in a far larger, more ambitious industrial strategy designed to reclaim something we haven't had for decades. That skepticism is valid, but it focuses on a single data point while ignoring the trajectory. This licensed production isn't the final destination. It is the precisely engineered cornerstone of a national industrial strategy aimed at reclaiming something we haven't possessed for decades, real design authority over critical systems. The strategy built around that cornerstone is methodical. It is not a sudden leap, but a calculated, phased transfer of capability. It starts with Canadian facilities producing roughly 10 to 20% of the engine components. As that share grows, we layer in more complex processes and move up the value chain, step by step, until we reach full engine assembly and testing in Montreal. Only then do we scale toward a production rhythm of 50 to 100 complete units per year. On paper, that sounds like manufacturing. In practice, it's a deliberate apprenticeship in advanced aerospace architecture, designed to build a domestic supply chain from the ground up. This is how a nation builds real leverage. It directly addresses that quiet, persistent frustration. Why, with all our talent, are we still dependent? By turning it into concrete milestones. A rising share of engine work done here, and a growing slice of overall defense contracts flowing through Canadian firms. Because leverage isn't found in simply assembling someone else's design. It's built by becoming the ecosystem that can innovate around that design, export its own components, and eventually design the next generation itself. That shift is what turns defense spending from a recurring national cost into a genuine economic multiplier. Prime Minister Mark Carney's defense industrial strategy is essentially a spreadsheet of that multiplier effect. It rewires procurement so that capability building at home is a core deliverable, not an afterthought. By pushing the domestic share of defense work from roughly 30% today towards 70%. It keeps far more of each procurement dollar circulating through Canadian wages, supplier contracts, and tax revenues instead of leaking abroad. And by targeting a 50% increase in defense exports, it turns the same engine program from a pure cost into a revenue stream as allied air forces buy technology that comes off Canadian lines. Add those two flows together and you arrive at the strategy's headline targets: 125,000 high-skilled jobs and $125 billion in downstream economic benefits by 2035. This is our national blueprint for turning a licensed production deal into a broader industrial architecture. Just as important, the way this deal is structured fits a wider pattern. When Saab pitched its Gripen fighter to Canada, it anchored its offer in a similar industrial package. 12,600 domestic jobs in exchange for a 72-jet purchase. That proposal never moved from marketing promise to execution, but it still tells us something critical about the rules of the game. Major defense primes now expect to be judged not only on performance and price, but on the depth of the industrial ecosystem they are prepared to build in country. that is the playbook. So in this engine program, we have more than an attractive narrative. We have a phased production plan on Canadian soil, specific and measurable national targets, and a clear template for negotiating future contracts around domestic capability. Canada is shifting from client to partner and now to an architect in training, which brings us back to the fundamental question that opened this entire analysis. When a new player on the board learns to build its own engines of sovereignty, what happens to the old order? That old order, it doesn't shatter, it dissolves. The answer to that opening question, Yama, what happens when a country can build the heart of a fighter jet on its own terms, is now clear. By putting a next-generation engine line on Canadian soil, the long-held U.S.-centered monopoly on advanced propulsion isn't being politely challenged, it's being bypassed. And with that bypass, the architecture of power around these engines shifts. Imagine a map. For decades, the flow of this critical technology has been a series of one-way arrows, all starting in the United States and radiating out to allies. A centralized hub-and-spoke model, controlled, predictable. Now watch that map redraw itself in real time. The U.S. hub is still there, but it's no longer alone. Fresh lines are etched onto the board. A link forms between the UK and Japan. Another connects Italy to Canada. The Montreal plant isn't just another industrial address. It's a sovereign node in that network, where Canada controls production runs, anchors high-end propulsion expertise at home, and hardens its supply chain against someone else's export politics. As one analyst put it, the long-term monopoly is fading, new pathways are forming, and the possibilities for what modern defense manufacturing can be are being redefined. For Canada, this doesn't just change a graphic, it changes leverage. Ottawa has moved from simply buying finished engines to tying access to a top-tier program, to co-production, tech transfer, and a permanent industrial base in Montreal. That combination is what makes Canada's strategy a real operational blueprint for other middle powers. Align procurement with industrial policy, insist on domestic capability, and treat every engine deal as a sovereignty decision, not just a purchase order. Strategic sovereignty stops being a slogan and becomes something you can literally walk through on a factory floor. A new era of global defense manufacturing has, quietly, already begun. If this framework for understanding strategic sovereignty was valuable to you, if it helps you read the next engine contract headline as a power move, not just a procurement line item, consider subscribing. We'll keep connecting the dots on the forces that are quietly but decisively shaping Canada's future.